a Hillary Clinton was a guest at the Liberal convention in Ottawa, and there was a protest outside, not a very big one, but a small protest with people holding a war criminal placard, which is, of course, a good thing that there was this protest. And in other news, the Canadian government has really ramped up its ugly Canadian policies in Mexico. They are pushing hard against a mining legislation reform that's designed to be less ecologically damaging and to garner greater benefits for the local communities, reduce the length of mining concessions. And as I mentioned in last week's session, the trade minister came out publicly against it, Canada's trade minister. And then this week, Minister Neng, I don't know how to pronounce her name, she had a meeting with her American counterpart, and they raised the issue and whether it violated the North American trade agreement. And then Canada's ambassador in Mexico City, alongside a bunch of Canadian mining companies, met with I think the economy minister of the Mexican government to put pressure on the Mexican government over the mining legislation. This is just a continuation. I mean, it's about 70% of the foreign companies in Mexico, mining companies, are Canadian. So Canada is obviously the big player. This policy is the continuation of long-standing Canadian policy in favor of companies that are often controversial. Sometimes they're involved in significant ecological damage, human rights violations. And previously, big tax, there was back in 2017, the big tax dispute between a number of Canadian mining companies and the then new AMLO government. And the Canadian government has raised the issue and was very publicly backing the Canadian mining companies, who I think were accused of not paying like $360 million in outstanding taxes to the government. So this is a ongoing story. We'll see what happens. It looks like the Mexican government's going to move forward with their legislation, but we will see where that goes exactly. Jack Johnson, with the American-based close follower of Haiti, he published a story alongside a number of a Colombian journalist that got the internal messaging between the Colombians that are accused that have been detained and accused of in the assassination of the Haitian president, or de facto president at that point, Jovenel Moise, who was assassinated about 2 years ago. And in this article, long article that was published 5 or 6 days ago, they show that a number of the Colombians that were involved were actually in contact with the Canadian embassy, and in fact, even apparently tried to call the Canadian ambassador after Moise was killed. And they believe they had the tacit support of the U.S. Government. So there's been details coming out. I haven't followed that closely about exactly sort of who's involved in the assassination. I know there are people within the Haitian community that I follow on Twitter that really very much believe now that the Americans had a pretty clear hand in all of this. I'm not really sure, but this article clearly points further in that direction. The two different Canadian parliamentary committees, the Committee on Foreign Policy and the Committee on Human Rights, put out a report 2 or 3 days ago titled "The Human Rights Situation in Haiti." And it puts forward a whole bunch of recommendations about Canadian policy in Haiti. Among other recommendations, it does state on the positive side that Canada should not send a military mission to Haiti. So that, I would say, is getting, it's clearly been pretty clear that's off the table for a while now, but this would be further confirming that. The report, though, doesn't say anything about Canada's role or how Canada should stop propping up Ariel Henry and the decade-long PHTK regime that Canada helped appoint. And the report really sort of downplays Canada's historic role. It downplays Canada's role in ousting Aristide and thousands of other elected officials in 2004. It fails to raise, there's 2 different parliamentary petitions that have been submitted to Parliament calling on the government to release all the documents around the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti, where Canada in 2003 helped to basically consolidate or plan the coup, depending on how you want to frame it. So it ignores that, and it ignores Canada's role in appointing or making Michel Martelly president back in 2010, 2011, Canada's important intervention in those elections to prop up Martelly, and it ignores Canada's role in basically with the US appointing Ariel Henry to lead the country 22 months ago. So the report whitewashes Canada's history in Haiti, but it has a number of recommendations that are, considering the history of Canada's role in Haiti, not so bad, around civil society, as I mentioned, around not dispatching the Canadian military. There's terrible flooding in Congo, in Rwanda, I think a little bit in southwestern Uganda. Hundreds and hundreds of people. I've seen different numbers. It looks like the numbers are going up. In the eastern Congo, have already died, and potentially that looks like that's going to keep going up. And this is tied to climate disturbances exacerbating this. Vietnam, just saw a story saying, has the highest recorded 45 degrees temperature on record. Obviously, we're seeing the forest fires in Alberta, and the Canadian government, as has come out, continues to have this outsized contribution to global climate catastrophe, and people in the Congo who are very little responsible for these disturbances are the ones that are the primary victims. It seems like the only thing that's going to end or lessen Canada's extraction of oil, it seems like the forest fires. The forest fires apparently have started to impact tar sands extraction. So that's you can't do this in a sane way. Keeping it in the ground, you have to wait till climate-induced disaster lessens the extraction process. 5 days ago, NDP Ontario MPP Sarah Jama, who we discussed in previous episodes a couple months ago, she was really attacked by the Israel lobby when she ran in the Hamilton by-election. She retweeted Noura Arakat, a well-known Palestinian, I believe she's based in the US now, lawyer, activist. And she retweeted Arakat's tweet about Kedar Adnan. I may have got that name wrong, but a Palestinian political prisoner who is a symbol of resistance, Palestinian resistance. He was on hunger strike, like more than 2 months. He had been on previous hunger strikes opposing his arbitrary detention, and he'd had successful hunger strikes in the past, and he sort of became a real symbol of Palestinian resistance because of that. And the Ontario NDP MPP retweeted Arakat's really totally innocuous comment about this Palestinian who just died just after he died on hunger strike. And this is a statement really not like nothing particularly aggressive at all in the tweet. In fact, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, UN experts, a couple of Israeli human rights groups, a whole bunch of Palestinian human rights groups, they all actually put out tweets that were maybe even stronger about his death. But B'nai B'rith took the retweet that Jama had put out of Nur Erakat and basically accused the NDP MPP of celebrating a terrorist. And he's a terrorist because Israel has decided, or some Israeli officials have decided he's a terrorist. If not, he hasn't even actually been found guilty in these very dubious occupation courts that have like 99.9% or something like that conviction rates. But he was actually just arbitrarily a preventative detention. And so immediately after this, B'nai B'rith, the Ontario NDP puts out a statement, like within hours the next morning, distancing themselves and saying she apologizes for this totally innocuous statement that, again, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and others put out on the matter. And this is just the latest concession of Ontario NDP to B'nai B'rith, which is a hate organization. I mean, let's be clear about this. This is an organization that has tried to destroy the left, has tried to destroy student unions all across Ontario. Has joined Doug Ford's lawsuit against Canadian Federation of Students to try to defund student unions across Ontario. And it obviously is a terrible anti-Palestinian record, but it's also involved in all kinds of Islamophobia. And yet the Ontario NDP continues to buckle to B'nai B'rith pressure, throw Palestinians under the bus. And it's really just kind of like remarkable to see how that plays out. In Parliament, so the NDP, there's a discussion, Foreign Affairs Committee, NDP federally here now we're speaking about, Foreign Affairs critic Heather McPherson raises her statement about boycotting settlement products and arms sales to Israel, and then a Liberal MP, Rachel Brennan, I believe, here in Montreal, she intervenes after this discussion is raised. The NDP motion is, or NDP's call for a boycott of settlement products and arms ban is raised, and she says, well, questions Foreign Minister Melanie Joly on the matter, and then Melanie Joly basically laughs at this idea, this notion that Canada would possibly have an arms ban on Israel or stop the purchase of settlement goods from illegal settlements, which is very much, I think, reflective. Hopefully, it's reflective of the famous dictum where first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Hopefully. But it was pretty egregious to see Joly just sort of laugh at Canada's contribution to Palestinian dispossession. In the National Post on Friday, the former head of the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, Avi Ben Lolo, I believe, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name. He has this op-ed where he begins early on about the NDP's statement about boycotting settlement products and banning arms sales. And a big part of the point of his op-ed is to say the way to counter this is more Holocaust education. Not even hiding it. It's not even hiding it. It's like, we're going to like beat you in the head with the crimes of the Nazis against European Jewry, to the point where you're going to be so scared to talk about Palestinian human rights. And they're just arguing it openly, that what, as if it's actually not the other way around, where the lessons of the Nazi Holocaust should be that, to not allow injustices that are taking place against Palestinians. But here you have just openly the Holocaust industry, as Norman Finkelstein put it 20 years ago, on offer in just a completely crass way. But unfortunately, it's effective, right? I mean, it scares the NDP. It now all of a sudden, what is standing against apartheid has now been flipped over into supporting genocide against a European Jewry. But that's the state of our political culture. On May 22nd in Toronto, there's going to be a big walk for Israel. There's a protest planned. I know people have seen protests planned being discussed, and I think it's going to be a bit bigger than previous years. I hope that takes place. People who are in Toronto go. I'm even thinking about myself traveling. I'm not sure. Mayor Weinstein, who's the former head of the Jewish Defense League, the sort of fascist kind of street thug organization, he put out a statement a couple of days ago about this protest being planned in response to the apartheid rally. And he said that people should bring bats and dogs because to respond to the counter protest. So we'll see. He has in the past, of course, engaged in violence. I myself had, back in 2014, had my bike, when I was in Toronto, had my bike lock stolen, was pushed around by some JDL guys. But I don't think that certainly shouldn't deter. And the Walk for Israel will be taking place in an open park. I personally would suggest people go into the middle of the park and do some sort of stunt, maybe like lock arms, have a megaphone. I mean, don't just rally around the edges, but make sure that every single damn person who is walking in favor of apartheid knows that they're walking in favor of apartheid, and knows that people think they're a bunch of racists. So I think that I strongly advise anyone who's in Toronto to participate in that counter protest, and to be creative about it. The head of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, was in Ottawa a couple of days ago, and he spoke. Looks like he was brought by the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, and he spoke at one of their events, and then he met a bunch of diplomats. Of course, the Raoul Wallenberg Center is Irwin Cotler's organization, and Cotler is in the photos with the guy, with the head of the ICC, lead prosecutor of ICC. Now, South Africa really recently, this big controversy. South Africa has been announced they were going to pull out of the International Criminal Court because of the double standards of the ICC. Not pursuing U.S. or Israeli officials for their human rights, violation of international law and war crimes, but targeting Putin. I think that was the main issue that the South African government was raising, in the double standard. I have to say, the head of the prosecutor of the ICC, lead prosecutor, meeting with Irwin Cotler, who has never seen an Israeli war crime he didn't support, who sent a letter to the ICC calling on them not to investigate Israel's war crimes two and a half years ago. That really just confirms the South African denunciation of this double standard of the ICC. That's it's, I think, kind of remarkable. Unfortunately, I only found out about it after it. I actually may have gone to Ottawa. It was a public event, and I certainly would have prodded people in Ottawa to go and ask some tough questions of Cotler and the chief prosecutor. Today, I was able to go to the Canadian Labour Congress convention happening at the Palais des Congrès here in Montreal, and Jagmeet Singh was speaking, and I was able to ask him. Let's just see, is this working? I was able to ask him. I waited patiently and was able to ask him about his policy of supporting the U.S. empire.
I just want to ask why the NDP supports the U.S. empire position on China, on NATO proxy war, on Iran, pretty much everywhere.
We don't support the U.S. empire.
But you're supporting sending more Canadian military vessels and spending more military money in Asia. You're supporting the NATO proxy war, which is basically fueling more billions of dollars worth of weapons and imposing negotiations.
Yeah, so you don't support the U.S. empire.
NATO expansion.
And what we do support, though, is people in Ukraine are suffering, and we want to support them because they're suffering really badly. And we want to make sure that people aren't suffering human rights violations, and we'll make sure that we give them the ability to defend themselves.
But you supported NATO, NATO joining Ukraine joining NATO before the invasion was an essential reason for the invasion. And you continue to push that.
I would say that if you look at Putin's track record, he has stolen from that country. He has abused his citizens. He has basically pillaged and plundered the country, put all the wealth of that country into the hands of a couple of billionaires, and he has robbed from the people. People are opposed to this war. The people of Russia are opposed to it. He's clearly a dictator. He does not actually represent the views of the actual people, and so it's not someone I would be in any way shouting as a hero. It's very clearly someone that has killed his opposition leaders, he jailed them. It's not a person I would think a bad idea for you to try to put up Putin as some sort of hero.
No one's putting up Putin as hero. Canada push NATO expansion. All right, but that's not background that matters. That's background. That's not background that matters.
How are you?
So that was today. It turned a discussion about NATO, NDP's NATO policy into me arguing that Putin is a hero. I guess it was kind of an interesting way he tried to deflect away from the question. And so yeah, anyways, that it was interesting. I actually had another, the Liberal language minister had a press conference a couple hours after, and the minority language minister, I'm forgetting her name, Taylor, last name, and I went over actually to ask her about language questions in Ukraine and some of the background there, and I was her flax were able to basically divert it. But I'll be posting that video to Twitter. Now at the NDP or at the Canadian Labour Congress convention, they I think it's that Mr. Singh was at, that I saw him at. There was this past week we had the 9th anniversary of the Odessa massacre at the trade union office in Odessa in 2014, May 2nd of 2014. And as I posted to Twitter, in my 2018 book, Left, Right, Marching to the Beat of Imperial Canada, none of the Unifor, CUPE, United Steelworkers, UFCW, PSAC, Public Service Alliance Canada Union, none of them had made any statement about the Odessa massacre back in 2014. And of course, none of them made any statement. I'm basically certain. I looked into it back in 2017 when I was doing my book, and I'm pretty certain they didn't in recent days, which is remarkable because, 45, 50 people being killed at a labor federation office is not not a small thing when right-wing thugs burned the Labor Federation office. That history is still very relevant today, and that unfortunately it's the labor movement. I looked briefly on the Canadian Labour Congress at their convention whether they're going to put forward a resolution. They wouldn't be putting forward a resolution condemning Canada's role in NATO proxy war. If they put forward a resolution, it would probably be in some way in favor of what the Canadian government is doing. There was a National Post article about how Rochelle, the light armored vehicle producer here in Canadian Ontario-based, paid Ukrainian brokers to secure $92 million sole-sourced contract with Canada. So this firm that's well entrenched in the sort of Ukrainian-Canadian lobby, they use Canadian government money essentially to pay off. This is a lawsuit. This hasn't been confirmed, but this is the accusation that a former company official is making, reported on in the National Post, that they paid Ukrainian government official to get this contract, and they inflated the price of the vehicles. And in the story, they point out that the company, before the Russian invasion, was already talking up the fact that this would be good with the bottom line. Okay, so they already understood that Russia invading would lead to the contracts, likely lead to contracts, or likely lead to Canada sending weapons to Ukraine, and that would likely lead to contracts for them. And this week, there's a couple of other developments about how Canada has benefited from the Russian invasion, which again I consider illegal and brutal, but definitely provoked. And so Cameco, which is a big Canadian uranium company, they just signed a $4 billion agreement with the Ukrainian Energoatom, which is the Ukrainian nuclear power company, to sell uranium. And so basically the Ukrainians have been reliant on Russian fuel, and now they want to get off Russian fuel. And so big, huge contract with Canadian uranium company. The Western Prairie Standard, the grain publication of in Western Ontario or Western Canada, they published a story a couple of days ago titled "Canada Fills Ukrainian Grain Gap," and says that in a year before last, Ukraine exported 2.7 million tons of wheat to Indonesia. But in the same period in 2022, 2023, they only exported 340,000 tons. And Canada's exports to Indonesia have gone up 66%. So Canadian grain exporters have benefited from the displacement of Ukrainian exports. And I think that goes with there's a whole lot of commodity and other Canadian companies that have done actually quite well by the conflict, the effort to move away from Russian commodities, and also the increased commodity, oil, etc., natural gas prices has also benefited lots of different Canadian interests. There were 2 Canadians killed about a week ago in around Bakhmut. I think that brings up to 5 the number of former Canadian soldiers killed fighting. The Canadian Foreign Policy Institute did a webinar with Jeffrey Sachs and Ivan, I always can't pronounce his last name, the University of Ottawa professor, expert on Ukraine and the Maidan. And it was a really good turnout on, I think it was on Wednesday, really good turnout of 11 a.m., like 500 or so people participated in the Zoom. And then on YouTube, it's the video's gone over like 30,000 in like 3 days. People watched it. There's a clip on Twitter that's like 640,000 people that watched a little clip of it. There was a press release sent out about this event, tied in Sachs and Lula and the South African, calling on Canada to push for negotiations and sort of challenging Canadian policy. Not any media, none of the big media. There was a couple of lefty publications that I think participated in the webinar. None of the big media. So you have a situation where there's clearly an appetite for it. Like if the video on YouTube is probably get 40,000, 50,000 maybe people that will watch it on YouTube and bits of it, elsewhere. But yet the dominant media just absolutely refused. They were offered the ability to ask a question of Jeffrey Sachs, not interested. And it was sent, widely to both directly to individual journalists and also to a wide media list. So it just really speaks to how, they've decided there's just basically no space for a countervailing perspective on Canada's role. I'm just doing a piece about, I think I may have mentioned him previously, about Samir Zuberi, who's a Liberal MP, who I was in a Concordia student union with back in 20 years ago, and just Netanyahu protests. And is somebody muted? Unmuted? No? Well, anyways, if somebody notices, I just tried to put the mute block. I forgot to do that. So I mentioned Samir Zuberi. He was with the Netanyahu protests in the executive Concordia Student Union with me back 20 years ago. And I'm just doing this piece on him and just his transition. He's now a Liberal MP. And to really how how dangerous personal political ambition is in a political culture that's so deeply imperialistic and structured around so much injustice. And Zuberi, who was he was at the Netanyahu protest. There's a photo of him when he's on the megaphone, part of the protest that stopped Netanyahu from speaking, and the student union became sort of, the most highly publicized, radical left-wing student union, maybe in Canadian history. So he was part of that executive, a very nice guy, friendly. I'm not, I haven't remained on, close terms with him or anything, but I see him every so often, and he's, he's very nice, very friendly. And to see this trajectory. And what's prompted me finally to write this piece. So as I mentioned in a previous episode, when there was this burning of this Israeli flags in his riding, he condemned this as this great hate act. And apparently it's a 16-year-old who's his parents are of Lebanese descent. Of course, they've had Israel invade their homeland multiple times. May well be why he's in Canada, is because Israeli invasions of Lebanon. And this framing of it is just this hate act, and not that there's a very important political element that Samir Zuberi did in his tweets is real deference to the Israel law. But it's part of his trajectory of moving towards basically accepting Canada's contribution to Palestinian dispossession. But what prompted me to write do this piece on Zuberi is that the Haiti report that came out, he's the chair of the Human Rights Committee of Parliament. And so his name is him and another official, the two main names on the report. I doubt he wrote it, but he was involved. He, signed off on this description of Canada's role in Haiti. And I know that Zuberi's not doesn't hate, the impoverished majority of Haiti. He doesn't, quite frankly, if we were to talk about it, we probably have in the past, he wouldn't have any problem with my perspective on Canadian imperialism in Haiti. But he is ambitious and he wants to, be an MP, and ultimately I think wants to move up the whole, chain. And he's more than happy to sign off on a report that whitewashes Canadian imperialism in Haiti and enables ongoing Canadian imperialism. And also, as I mentioned previously, the big one is on the Uyghurs. He's been a central player in the whole Uyghur question and got lots of national prominence, quoted in the Globe and Mail repeatedly, and national, CTV, whatever, national TV interviews on the Uyghur question. He's laying the groundwork for growing conflict between Ottawa, Washington, and China. This is Mike Pompeo, who declared it as a genocide back in January 2021. He's not doing it. This is Mike Pompeo has been, anti-Muslim all over. He's not doing it because he cares about the Muslims of the Xinjiang province. I mean, this is the comedy. But Samir Zuberi has very much aligned. He was a Muslim rights advocate after he left Concordia Student Union, and did some good work, quite frankly, on security certificates and other issues relevant to Islamophobia. He has taken this issue as it aligns with his Muslim human rights activism with the U.S. empire, and so he's gotten all kinds of kudos from establishment Muslim organizations, and he's developed profile from this, and it's kind of fascinating on a personal level to see this of an individual who I know who has sort of his personal ambition has just brought him towards making these accommodating himself to injustices, and now quite frankly being engaging in it, not just sort of going along with it, but taking up a more active kind of role, which is the case clearly with Haiti on this recent Israel thing, and with regards to China. On China, NATO set up a Japan office a few days ago. So NATO is increasingly now not just a North Atlantic treaty organization, but it's very increasingly openly going to be targeting China. On the China file, many developments, of course. The whole foreign interference thing really big this week, and the Trudeau government just expelled a Chinese diplomat today. That was just announced a couple hours ago. On Friday, the Chinese Family Services of Montreal and Centre Sino-Québec, two Chinese Canadian groups here in Montreal that provide different services to the community. In one case, has been around for 50 years. A couple months ago, they were accused of being Chinese police stations. And then the RCMP announced this investigation, went public, announcing this investigation of them being Chinese police stations. The media just ate it up, okay? Multiple stories. And on Friday, they had a pushback about this. And the RCMP has now finally come out and said they are no longer Chinese. They're no longer illegal activities. They're no longer Chinese police stations. Nothing appears to have happened except for the RCMP interviewed a couple of the staff members at the organization at this press conference on Friday with Senator Wu denouncing this campaign against them. There were a whole bunch of representatives of the Chinese community, packed room, not huge, but a good 50 people from almost entirely from the Chinese community there. Despite all this fear that's been generated around this group, and this they have no idea what the accusation. I mean, they just know that they've just been accused of this general Chinese police station, whatever that means exactly. Nothing has changed, and now the RCMP has said it. The illegal activities that were previously going on are no longer going on, and just the world just moves forward. And this is just an example of this whole Chinese interference thing, where it's just these accusations. You don't know what's true, what's not. There's no legal process. There's no. The media hypes it up. Of course, the continuation with the Trudeau Foundation business, even though the former China hawk Harper appointee as Canadian ambassador said that he came out Le Devoir that said that in fact the billionaire that is the claim is that the Chinese consulate asked him to give it to the Trudeau Foundation to garner support with Trudeau after Trudeau became a Liberal leader. The Canadian ambassador, total hawk on China, came out publicly and said, well, this whole announcement was initially all about giving money to the plan was all about giving money to the Université de Montréal. It had nothing to do with the Trudeau Foundation. And that was only later on the Université de Montréal, the Trudeau Foundation asked to get in on some of this money. And so that just completely undercuts the whole premise of the donation, this nefarious donation to the Trudeau Foundation to garner influence over Justin Trudeau. That just totally undermines it, but they continue on as if it's just this truth that happened, and so it's just remarkable to see the power of this. And as I mentioned, the accusations that came out a couple of days ago about CISA saying that after the Conservative MP Michael Chong that he had voted in favor of the resolution on the Uyghur question, that they targeted his family members in Hong Kong. It's all in this vague. This is just an allegation of CSIS. First of all, clearly government officials didn't take it very seriously because the sort of interference argument, people are saying they didn't take it seriously because they're in on the interference. The Liberals are in on the interference. But I think the more plausible thing is because the allegations, variations of this have been coming from the intelligence agency, totally aligned with Washington for a whole long time. Terry Glavin has this interesting piece, the hawk, total hawk on this issue in the National Post, where he labels all these allegations that CSIS has made for 20 years, very similar type allegations. And his point is that we've known this all along, and they just don't take it seriously because they're all guilty of it. But just a stronger point or takeaway from it could be that in fact they've been hyping up this stuff to justify their existence, to justify their relationships with the NSA for a long time. It's all part of a long-standing hostility with China, which just ramped up in recent years as China's become a more a powerful economy and more of a threat to U.S. dominance, and so, but increasingly it's successful. And like I said, the Chinese are almost for sure going to respond to the expulsion of their diplomat, and who knows where that all goes. The front page of the National Post has there's a liberal running for the Liberals, Kevin Vaughn, who had to withdraw as running for the Liberals 2 days before the last election because it came out that he was charged with sexual assault previously, which he never announced to the Liberal parties when they vetted him. And now on the front page of the National Post a couple of days ago was "Another MP claims he is victim of Chinese meddling." And so now the MP who's been sitting as an independent is saying it was a honeypot by the Chinese from years ago that got him entangled with this woman who was all planning to at this point he hadn't even run. He wasn't even running for the party or whatever, but it was all planned to get him on as a sexual assault. And so he's sort of trying to rehabilitate himself by the Chinese interference angle, and they put it on the front page of the National Post. I have no idea one way or another if this is true. It all comes across as totally outlandish to me. But this is now front page news that we're supposed to take as a reasonable thing. And a number of people who wrote about what he did, his sexual assault stuff, say they push back pretty hard against this report, but it's out there nonetheless in the public record. Front page of today's Globe and Mail is that Canada is trying to join AUKUS, the Australia, UK, US nuclear submarine alliance against China. And in large part what it is about getting Australia to buy a bunch of really expensive nuclear submarines, so they can, rather than the defensive submarines they were about to buy from France, they can buy these more offensive submarines, so they can contribute in a greater way to U.S. Containment of China policy. That's the sort of essence of it. And so they want Canada to join it. And so now Canada looks like they're trying to join it. This is just a further add-on to the Indo-Pacific strategy, more naval vessels, more security money devoted to the region, more Canadian military contribution, and we're just ramping up more and more, while there's, top officials in the US, in Washington, talking about war with China. So this is and all kinds of, more and more of these alliances with regional countries. Finally, just to end, there was a story about Huawei and Waterloo breaking off its research relationship with Huawei. So initially, the Huawei danger was they were going to get, the back door to our 5G network, and maybe pass the information on to the Chinese authorities. And now just any research stuff with Huawei, Canadian researchers, that's, outside of bounds. And University of Waterloo's cutting. Looks like McGill is moving in that direction. A bunch of other universities have relationships with Huawei, who's invested actually large amounts in R&D in Canada, pushing that way. Now, as part of the pushback, and I do want to emphasize this point because I think it's actually important. There is a pushback from the worst sectors of some of the worst sectors of Canadian political life to this hostility towards China. So the CEO of Barrick Gold, the most egregious Canadian mining firm, abuses all around the world. Bristow is his last name. He's not a Canadian anymore, but it's still based in Toronto. The title was Bristow Rails Against Ottawa's Interference in Canadian Mining Industry. And he's basically criticizing these policies that are designed to move away from mining relations with China, selling to China, blocking Chinese companies from investing in Canada, et cetera. So there is this pushback from some of the most reactionary factions of Canadian capital, particularly in the mining sector, but more generally, corporate executives who want to just make money. They just want to profit. They just want, good old-fashioned capitalist exploitation. And they're pushing back against those who want, U.S. empire-led, ramping up toward, move us right to the precipice of war. So that's the political forces that drive Canadian foreign policy. Unfortunately, the objective, of course, of the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is that the more popular, social justice-minded sectors of Canadian life get more engaged, more mobilized, and organized to influence foreign policy. But that's where we're at. I'll leave it at that. And if people have questions and comments, Laura, I've made you a co-host, so you can. I think you can see things better than me in terms of who's got their hands up and stuff like that.
You're muted, Laura. Laura, you're muted.
Sorry, so I'm unmuted now. Okay, so we have Jake and then Richard.
Go ahead, Jake.
Yes, thank you, Eve. You mentioned in your talk more in the beginning about Sarah Jama and the way the Zionist lobby here going after her to decimate her, and that she contacted Nora Erakart from New York, I think it is, a lawyer, and so on. And basically what happened now, since the Jewish lobby came after her, that she is, of course, anti-Semite and all the crap, again, NDP carrying down and trying to distance themselves from that, as it happens thousands of times with everybody, every party in Canada, everybody that talks about Israel and so on. I was thinking for the last 2 years that and what you think about it, that maybe it's about time we stop that. We stop apologizing, stop being afraid, stop saying, no, we didn't mean it, please don't take us the wrong way, and so on. That's what the the Zionist lobby looking for. 2 weeks ago, I also saw an article from a notable person, I forget now his name. He wrote exactly the same thing. He said it's time to stand up, push back. That's the right thing to do. Instead of saying, we should say to them, you are anti-Semite, because you actually promoting anti-Semitism by your actions always, and so on. And do that from now on, forcefully stand up and be counted, because that perhaps the better way of all the time apologizing.
I obviously agree 100%. And I think that she, in 2 months ago, when she got attacked, she put out a statement that and obviously under pressure from the Ontario NDP leadership, that I don't have the exact word in front of me. I just wrote a piece about it, saying, apologizing for her harmful comments. Very vague, but she set the stage for what B'nai B'rith did a few days ago, where it's already like she's done something wrong that she's apologized for, and then they use that to then push one step further. And the objective, of course, is to just get her to just shut up on this issue. And unfortunately, it's probably going to work, or it's going to work to the extent that only when the violence and the attacks get so egregious. That happens, Israel does this every 6 months, a year, or whatever, where there's so much attention, and then the MPs have this sort of backbone to make a statement, right? But otherwise, they feel totally fearful, and so I totally agree with that. Now, I want to also say, so I was on I think it was Wednesday of last week. There was a very like 24-hour after the. Adan, the political prisoner, after he died in his hunger strike, the Palestinian, there was a rally here in Montreal at the Norman Bethune, just statue by Concordia. And there was about 6 Hasidic Jews there, the Natura Karma, I always get their name wrong. Okay, there's probably 6 people who were visibly Jewish. There's a few other people from Independent Jewish Voices and whatnot, but not visibly Jewish. A car comes by. This woman with her 8-year-old daughter in a van, a family van, or whatever they're called there, comes by and starts berating one of these guys. And starts, like, I didn't hear all of what exactly she said, but this was clearly an anti-Semitic incident. She was a Zionist denouncing him and targeting him. Didn't target me. He wasn't targeting the non-Jewish looking people. They were targeting him because he was Jewish. And this reminded me, and I was saying this to Scott Weinstein from Independent Jewish Voices, who was there last year at the Israel rally. They caught a woman on video saying, "We wish you had gone to." That Hitler had wiped you out. That was caught on video. The Zionist, presumably Jewish woman, saying that to the non-Zionist, visibly Jewish people. And this was an extreme anti-Semitic incident. No attention. I wrote about it. I think it was the only person I wrote about it. And the way I brought it up to Scott was telling me about incident at the Rally for Israel that he organized, or against the Rally for Israel, counter rally, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. He was telling a story about this exact same thing happened. And in fact, in that case, the Montreal Gazette reporter was actually overheard this being said to the visibly Jewish person by the Zionist, the Rally for Israel people, and he actually put it in the paper. So he wrote it down and he put it in the paper. And so what the whole discussion was about, so there was at the Walk for Israel in Montreal a week ago or so, that Scott and I were both at, there was a fair bit of security Okay. And so the point was that the security that was there, this is like private security. It wasn't to stop the handful of pro-Palestinian counter protesters. It was to stop the apartheid fanatics from coming over and doing something like that would like, some anti-Semitic thing to the visibly Jewish non-Zionists, or just some sort of like other kind of egregious thing that they would do, which actually did. They tried to steal the flag that I had. I got an Israel flag. They actually this woman tried to steal it from me. And so the security was actually designed to like keep the Israel rabble, if you like, in check, because they know that they're so like, racist and fanatical that they might, do something as egregious as going up to visibly Jewish people and say, we wish Hitler would have wiped you out because you believe Palestinians are human beings. So I think that, we have to like raise that stuff, right? You have to like, push back and say, who's being anti-Semitic? Some of the most egregious anti-Semitic incidents at these rallies actually are from the anti-Palestinian supporters. I see Richard.
Richard, unmute, please. Yeah.
You hear me now?
Yes, please.
Good. Yeah, Yves, I live here in the United States, in Massachusetts, so I was curious about the Canadian media as a whole. As the CBC, I understand, is publicly owned. We have a public radio here, publicly owned with taxes and stuff, and the BBC is also. So my question is, do your public media parrot and give stenographers to the government policies? Do you get any alternatives, voices on your public radio, on your public TV? And I know the BBC, when Jeremy Corbyn ran, they were ruthless against him, horrible, never said anything well about him. So just tell me, as a general, your media as a whole, and plus the Globe Mail, on the op-ed pieces, do you get other voices in these, alternative, and don't just parrot the government policies lines? Thank you.
Yeah, I would make a distinction between domestic issues and foreign policy, and on domestic issues, I wrote about this in my book, A Propaganda System. I worked at the Communications Energy Paperworkers Union for it was a couple years. One of the things I did was I wrote op-eds on behalf of Dave Coles, the president of the union, and always on domestic issues, or basically always. I got them published, like the Ottawa Citizen, like a piece even calling for like economic democracy. Got it published in the Ottawa Citizen, got things published in Vancouver Sun, the Saskatchewan daily papers, Toronto Star, got a whole bunch, I was like 15 op-eds published on domestic issues that in some cases were really going against sort of the grain. And there's dynamics. It would, they came with the institutional weight of the union. But when I submit stuff on, and I had that same experience personally when I started writing in the early 2000s. I got op-eds, Globe Mail, Ottawa Citizen, a few other places, op-eds published about domestic issues, by myself. As I started covering, I started going to foreign policy issues, like basically nothing, right? And I've submitted dozens and dozens of op-eds, right? And, the fact that they publish it on domestic issues, it's probably not my writing, because I've gotten domestic issues and both as early on writing and then, through the union. So it's probably not the writing issue. It's ideological. And so, no, I think there's a very, very narrow range of debate in the dominant media. And the CBC is mostly reflects that. It's on when it comes to, at least at the rhetorical level now, on Indigenous issues, it's gotten fairly good, right? It will talk about like genocide. It will talk about colonialism and when it gets the land back and other elements of the process. They're not really actually that good, but at least at the cultural level, at this sort of historical kind of ideological level, you're allowed to say that, Canada is a genocidal state, and when it comes to anti-racism, at least in the narrow, be Black Lives Matters or whatever, they're willing to, have a fair bit of sort of dissent and kind of voices. But when it comes to foreign policy, there's almost no space. And over the past 14 months, specifically on Ukraine, but more generally, the space has even gotten narrower, right? And the CBC has just become, it's just, there's both on Ukraine and on China, there's just almost no room for dissent. And I mentioned that about Jeffrey Sachs, right? So Jeffrey Sachs, I mean, he's not that, he's, prominent, but not that prominent. And, should Canadian media have covered his webinar? I don't know, but, it's also Lula da Silva, the Brazilian president. It's also the South African ambassador who are making similar comments. The South African ambassador one's interesting. So the South African ambassador 10 days ago comes out basically, criticizing Canadian policy, and the Canadian press does report it. Canadian press did a story on the South African ambassador criticizing Canadian policy in Ukraine, which a bunch of the NATO proxy warrior people really condemned. They said, why did Canadian press, run this story? It's not newsworthy, whatever. I didn't see it in any paper. So the Canadian press reports on it, but they doesn't actually appear in any of the papers. So the long answer to that is, yeah, I would say on some domestic issues, when it comes to a strike, if you look at the CBC's coverage of the PSAC recent strike, public sector workers strike, they allow some labor perspective. But when it comes to foreign policy issues, the range of debate is so narrow, and the amount of work you have to do. Like if you get like a whole bunch of prominent people to sign some public letter saying Canada should push for negotiations in Ukraine, you probably get, a story. The CBC might, reprint the Canadian press story. So, but on the other side, if they just put out a press release, it gets covered, right? And so like the amount of work, you have to have like a demonstration of like, 500 people, and maybe you'll get one story. Well, the other side, the military person just, says, we got to send a bunch more weapons, and, it's easy story. And so, yeah, the room for dissent is really minimal. And I go into it in the propaganda system book. I go into all of the, the facets of that. It's not just the media. It's the think tanks. It's the military funding so much money in public relations. The military is the biggest public relations apparatus in the country. And even then, if you look at CBC and specifically their history, and how closely they've been to the foreign policy establishment, like really direct relationship, less probably so today, that's part of it. Just as one little example, when the CBC refused, they apologized for using the word Palestine a couple of years ago in this interview with a comic or a comic book writer, not comics, graphic book writer, I'm forgetting his name right now, who actually has a book called Palestine. They used the word Palestine, and then they apologized, CBC Radio, the next day for using the word Palestine. In the CBC ombudsperson's justification for why they shouldn't use the word Palestine, they specifically state that because Global Affairs Canada doesn't usually use the word Palestine in its descriptor. Sometimes it uses it if the word Palestine is in the name of an organization, but they don't use the word Palestine in its descriptor. So the CBC shouldn't necessarily use the word Palestine. So they're explicitly saying they take their direction from Global Affairs Canada in the wording they use on that issue specifically. But I think that obviously generalizes to Canadian foreign policy more generally.
Thank you.
I just want to say Karen Rodman put in something on Action Network. If people want to write a letter to the NDP about the MP and comments on Palestine.
Yes, and I do very much invite everyone to do that. It's been like I think about 1,000 people have written, and I think the Ontario NDP one is one. It's an area where we have a little bit of influence, right? They are I think that there's division within the party. And so, lots and lots of people flooding all of the MPPs with criticism, can actually, shift things in not just in the long term, but in the short term.
Anne Wilco put her hand up and now it's down. Anne, did you want to ask a question? Maybe it's not.
Hi there. Hi. I guess. Hi, Eve. Hi, everybody. I tuned in late, so but thanks for the mention of Odessa. My mom's from Odessa. My maternal grandfather was Jewish. He was disappeared in 1942. About Sarah, I've written my own letter to my MPP because she's an NDPer, and I have her personal email. And I was checking Sarah's Twitter account before I did it, and I was really kind of upset because she makes some comments in the past, I don't know the date, about police doing things which are totally true, attacking Indigenous, disabled, et cetera, et cetera. She's herself a victim, obviously. But she also began it by saying that they kill babies. And I don't understand the reference there. It's perhaps to a specific event that I should understand, but I haven't sorted that out. But nonetheless, I'm writing my letter and referring to the latest retraction because there's so many, it's endless. It's despicable. But also speculating about who forces these retractions in my email and saying that I don't anticipate finding out, but I'd really like to know about the root of that. And Naturae Carta is the name of the Hasidic group. And they've been to Hamilton. They're just incredible. And they have been firebombed. I'm sure it made the front page of the Spec, I'm going to say 20 years ago, something like that. And I'm assuming it is because of their anti-Zionist stance. And this was somewhere in New York State. I can't remember it. And I have a horrible stack of paper. Well, I have many stacks of papers, but I don't know if people would know that they were firebombed once. And anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you so much for your ongoing work. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics about JAMA. The reference to, I know she's involved in anti-police kind of police brutality kind of stuff. I mean, I also as you mentioned, for being visibly Jewish and anti-Zionist, there is a lot of hate directed at them. So it's obviously important to stand in solidarity. And I was quite like, I walked over and this woman who was like berating this guy, she had like an 8-year-old daughter between her sitting in the passenger seat of the front, berating this guy through her daughter looking very uncomfortable. But her hate for this pro-Palestinian, visibly Jewish person was pretty overwhelming, I guess. So she needed to yell past her own daughter to attack this guy. But unless there's no more
questions,
comments or questions, it's past 7 o'clock. Thanks everyone. Same place, same time next week. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. So.